Hi, this is Stefan, and welcome to Couch Theater. My guest today is Greg, and basically what we're doing here is trying to get more people to enjoy more movies.
You know, I think something that we're doing here too is what you already do with me. You tell me a good movie to watch, I watch it, and then we talk about it. And I think something we're trying to do here is just do that with more than just the two of us. Try and get some more people involved in this process that we already have.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, I mean, I studied literature and writing, which is, fancy term for English. And, basically just did a lot of evaluating of literature, which extends to film. And I've been doing that my whole life. Love the shit out of it. So
yeah, you've definitely nurtured my love of movies in me, and I probably wouldn't watch as many movies if I wasn't friends with you, you know?
Oh, that's what I want to do with this podcast.
Hell yeah, man.
And still love into it and give it away.
Yeah, and I've studied philosophy for fun most of my life, so with your an analytical mind when it comes to movies and my curiosity of how things work, we always have some really interesting conversations about what movies are and what's this movie really about,
Yeah. We always come away with different takes. I like that.
Definitely.
So for this particular week, this particular podcast, we're talking about The Girl with All the Gifts.
Oh, man.
Which is on Amazon.
Oh, yeah.
Amazon Prime right now.
Yeah, they released it themselves. It's the only place you can get it.
Yeah. Oh, is it? Is it Amazon Prime exclusive?
Yeah, it is.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, it premiered in the U.S. On Amazon.
Oh.
It was never in theaters here.
Damn, I missed that. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Go Amazon.
Yeah, it was, and that's something that really blew my mind about this movie. It was like, here's this high quality zombie movie on Amazon, and they just drop it. Like,
yeah,
I didn't know this was coming up until you told me about it.
I think it's important to note you brought up it's a zombie movie.
It is.
I feel like once some people hear that, they'll immediately be turned off to the film, and that's a mistake because this film is so much more than a zombie movie.
It's not like any zombie movie I've seen before in a lot of ways.
Yeah, and I think one of the important parts of a zombie movie is exploring human nature. Not the zombie itself per se, but how people react in the face of a gruesome and terrifying undead person.
Right.
And what they do in relation to other people because of that. Like, what do we do to each other when we're in extreme peril, extreme danger, life-threatening danger?
Yeah, what parts of ourselves come out when we're in such alien situations?
Yeah.
Such dire situations.
And a zombie movie is really great for that. Well, good zombie movies really highlight those qualities. And
God
this
knows
is no
there's
different.
a lot of bad zombie movies out there.
Oh, yes. Well, especially now, it's very popular, this particular genre.
Oh, yeah. I mean, there's zombie fatigue in movies and video games, People are just like, give me a break. But that's not something that you need to feel about this movie, right?
No, it's a rose among the rotting corpses, you know?
Yeah.
So let's talk briefly about it and, some things that I think are important to know before you go in to the movie.
Yeah.
So, I mean, of course, it's a zombie movie. Some things you should look for are human nature, like we discussed.
What parts of these characters come out in face of the situation that they're in.
Yeah. And I think something that you had talked about a lot was survival.
Yeah.
And that's one of those things of human nature that becomes almost dominant in everything else. I mean, it does. It is dominant above everything else.
Yeah. And not just human nature, but nature itself,
Yeah. Right. There you go. I mean, nature is survival. It's just a melting pot of survival and what can, come to the top and rise above the rest.
Yeah, there's some mild themes of evolutionary thought in this movie, just being aware of that sort of competition and survival of the fittest is something that's helpful in approaching this movie.
Right, but also what makes us different than animals as far as survival goes, because we have this consciousness that allows us to evaluate survival in such a different way, and what it means to survive and the morality behind it. But in situations like this, where survival is, hanging by a thread, so to speak, I mean, you could die at any moment. How does that amplify the intensities of survival and mute or limit morality?
Yeah, where do our limits lie when we're faced in life or death situations?
Right.
Yeah.
Another thing briefly that I think we should hit is, as with all movies, I think I like to discuss, surprise is important, and limiting the expectations that you have when you go into it. Negative expectations. I don't think you should look at any trailers or get any spoilers to this movie. Surprise is a very important aspect of this movie.
Agreed.
And lastly, there are a couple different metaphors that run throughout the movie. And they do explain it, so I won't go over the story, but if you know the story of Pandora and Pandora's box, that comes up and they explain it. So it should be noted when it comes up, and try to hear exactly how they describe it.
Yeah, a number of times in the film, they really bring up the parallels.
Yeah.
They start talking about the metaphor within the movie itself, so those moments are ones that you want to pay attention to.
Yeah, because they are well written into the framework of this movie, woven almost seamlessly in there. And the other one that's really big is the Schrodinger's cat. That's really cool. A lot to play with that.
Yeah.
So, of course, also, I won't define it here. I don't think you should look up a definition either. I think you should rely on the movie to define it for you, because that's the point. They're supposed to define it for you so you can more adequately see the underlying metaphor.
Yeah, and then once everyone that's listening has watched the podcast, we'll be able to really get into what all of this means and what we think about it.
Yep, that's right. So at this point, you should be pausing this podcast and going and watching the movie on Amazon. And once you're done, come back and we'll get to the spoiler section, where we just talk about, honestly, whatever the hell we want.
Hell yeah.
All right. Okay, so we're back from the movie, and man, what a movie that was.
Oh, that movie is so fresh and yet so similar to a lot of things I've seen before,
Yeah, they definitely pay a lot of respect to other zombie movies, but they make it their own.
Yeah, I get feelings of like 28 Days Later and like the video game The Last of Us in there, we
definitely remember us talking about The Last of Us.
Yeah.
Specifically the fungus portion, which I thought was a really interesting way to talk about the infection itself, the fungus infecting the brain.
Yeah, it sort of puts it into this different context than other zombie movies. It's not just the living dead. It's a competing organism.
Right. And that's a good segment into the survival aspects of this movie.
This movie has a lot to say about nature.
Yeah, and like we talked about in the first half, this is such an example of what survival does to people, and especially as a tool or an excuse to override morality. In this case, we see this girl, and all of these children who are being treated like animals, like they're not human, when they are. They are human. But, of course, the people around us, the people who interact with them, the soldiers and the scientists, they not only treat them, but have mentally created this subject in their minds that these aren't humans, these aren't children, they're monsters, they're animals.
Anytime they catch them treating them too human, someone will jump in and remind them, no, they're not human.
Right.
They're not actually kids.
Yeah.
Like in the beginning of the film when the sergeant rubs his E-blocker off his skin to make all the children start freaking out. Mm-hmm. It's like, no, these aren't real people, is what he was trying to show the teacher.
Yeah, Miss Justino. Yeah, a very clear point. Like, look, they're animals. But I mean, it's just it's taking off the illusion. But it isn't an illusion.
No,
they are just children.
They're just different than us.
They're afflicted with something, and I guess affliction is the wrong word. I mean, that's almost the distillation of their own.
It's bringing judgment into it,
right,
rather than observation.
Right, exactly.
They're not afflicted by something. They're just something that's different than us.
They're something new.
Yeah, which they talk about in this movie, you know? Right. They're this new symbiotic life form.
Yeah. Nothing like you has ever existed. You know?
Right.
So, that suspension of morality is really interesting, and the way that humans are able to turn that on when needed. You know, and something, you know, things we're not capable of normally, that we wouldn't think we're capable of, but that is part of us. You know, and this makes the movie very clear. It's made very clear in the movie. I think other zombie movies, the way they go about it in this movie with children is really different and fresh, as opposed to other movies where it's just...
Yeah, you know, I think the most common way of expressing the humanity that was in the zombies in traditional zombie movies is when one of the group turns and everyone goes, "But my friend," and they go, "No, he's not your friend anymore.
Right.
He's just a zombie." But in this case, they do that with us, with children.
Yeah.
And yeah, they are a zombie, but they're something different. They're not like a person that's gone. They're a person that's come anew in this movie.
And I think another point that you had talked about before, as far as survival, going down to base instincts, you know, our survival, because we're humans, we feel that our survival is complex and based on thought and logic. Whereas it's very clear that we're just torturing children to survive, and we've moralized that. But these zombies, these children, and the people who have been, you know, completely made brain dead, basically, because of the infection, they're just trying to survive too. And, you know, the name even implies a basic survival trait. They call them the hungries. You know, you need to eat. They just need to eat to survive. And that's made very clear, say about 3/4 of the way through the movie, when I want to say Kirk. That's wrong.
No. Kieran.
I knew it was a K.
Yeah.
Kieran gets eaten, and the sergeant looks at Kieran's body and says, like, "Oh, those little bastards," you know. And
Melanie.
Yeah, Melanie. Gosh, I forgot her name too. Melanie is like, they're just surviving. They're just trying to survive, just like us.
They were just hungry.
They're hungry. Yeah.
And what was Kieran doing?
Right.
Looking for food. So were they.
So what was the main difference? You know, that suspension of morality and whose side it's on. And I think really quickly I'd like to talk about some more academic terms that are interesting to look at for this particular movie.
Yeah.
The grotesque and the abject And grotesque is a word that we use quite often in, every day. That's grotesque. That's disgusting.
Yeah.
But the grotesque is really all about fear, and in relation to monsters. What makes a monster really terrifying? And what makes a monster truly terrifying is the combination of human and other or animalistic traits. So something that makes these zombies and Melanie and the children, her kind, very terrifying is they have human intelligence. They look human, and yet they're not. They're animalistic in nature, and that blood and gore and just the way they were born, pulling themselves out of their mothers, chewing, tearing them. They were cord.
Right.
Their mothers were cord.
For all intents and purposes, these are people, but they also eat humans.
Yeah.
Like, that's their non-human part is what they do.
Yeah. And that is truly terrifying.
Yeah.
Because you're seeing humanness, but warped and distorted and broken down.
The non-children zombies, the humans that have been turned while have once been human, like, they're just covered in all this moss and completely deformed, and those things are grotesque. Like, you would look at that and say, "Oh, that's so grotesque."
Yeah, the visual, physical transformation from what once was human to this new thing is disturbing, disgusting. Yeah. And another example of that, but in Melanie's case, in the children's case, they let her go because they need her help in escaping. And then afterwards, to save Kieran, she goes out in her new clothes and she comes back with blood all over her.
Because she ate a cat.
Because she ate a cat.
So gross.
But that desecration, of her body and the blood all over her face.
Of her humanity.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, all the other characters look at her and are just disgusted. They're like, "Oh God, look what she's done."
Well, because they had, over time, slowly given her more and more leeway, started to see her as a child.
Yeah.
Which is what she is. And then are hit in the face with, she is more than just a child.
A disturbing reminder of her grotesque nature.
Yeah, right. But once again, the great thing about the grotesque is it's reminding us that we're animals.
Right.
We are just animals. We're all hungries,
We all need to eat.
Yeah. It's just we have niceties set up that make us seem, when we have to eat, just a little bit better, a little bit easier to withstand.
We use a napkin and silverware, right. And we try and be polite when in front of others. But really what it is just sinking your teeth into something that used to be living.
Yeah, right.
That's what it is, you know? That's, when you approach it from that angle, or in Melanie's case, eating is a grotesque thing.
Indeed. Very grotesque.
It requires death, and we're reminded of that.
Now, the abject is a little bit harder to explain.
Right. You've tried a couple times, or you've tried once with me before. Let's tell me about it.
Okay.
I'm still learning about this myself.
Well, and honestly, I even only have a very surface level understanding of the abject. I mean, there's lots and lots of books that have been written on it. Kristeva is the founder, or the person who coined the term. But basically,
when was that?
Gosh, I have no idea.
All right.
So a basic way to explain the abject is thinking about yourself as something that's not permanent. We're flesh, and we're decaying over time, and eventually we will die because, and decay, literally rot. And that rotting is a symbol of death. Now, we go through things every day that remind us of decay. And the most basic one is taking a shit. You shit in a toilet and you look at it and then you flush it away to get rid of it. But looking at it is disgusting. Shit is disgusting. There's a feeling inside of yourself that, immediately rejects it.
Yeah, unless you have some weird fetish.
Yeah.
No one likes being involved with shit.
No one likes shit. And there's something satisfying about getting rid of it, that flush, and watching it disappear, and all of a sudden everything's clean again. So the object is like seeing something and fearing it because it reminds you that one day you're going to die. And immediately you're hit with a desire, a compulsion to clean it, to get rid of it, to hide it. And satisfaction comes from that hiding of it, that cleaning of it, to make everything white and perfect. Now, obviously, you can go on a human level and say that's very different for certain people. Certain people have different limits of objection in their lives to certain things. But when applying it to things in the horror genre, like grotesquities, there's a bit of overlap. So
sort of like that eating metaphor that we were talking about,
right?
Reminding you that you're eating something that had to die.
Right. And, one thing that's abject is blood. When you see blood, you think of nasty things. Blood is disgusting.
Disease-ridden, potentially.
Right. But, when you eat a steak, of course, some people like their steak pretty dry. But for the most part, like medium rare, that's a bloody steak. You're cutting into it.
I order my steaks rare. I'm a
out.
chef.
Yeah.
I want to taste that meat.
I mean, if you're a meat eater out there and you imagine a nice medium rare steak, you might be salivating right now. Your stomach might turn a little bit like, I'm hungry.
I'm noticing the saliva in my mouth right now.
I know. I wouldn't mind a steak.
Oh man, yeah.
But that is exactly, along the same lines of what Melanie did when she went to eat that cat. And all that blood came out. She was eating meat. And yet, that disturbed us. That disgusted us.
Because she wasn't clean about it.
We put things in a box. We make them nice and neat. And that makes us civilized. And objection is about civilizing things and making things clean. And the grotesqueness on the opposite end is about showing us the dirty part of ourselves inside, literal holes inside, orifices inside of ourselves.
Like babies eating themselves out of their mother's womb.
Right. And that's a great example of where the grotesqueness and the abjectness intersect in this area.
Right.
So there is nothing more abject. Well, I'd say that's an opinion, but there's nothing more abject than seeing a baby. Because a baby is a representation of new life. But also a mother looking at a baby, that's a symbol of your death. Because you're seeing a child, something new, coming out of you, something old. So it's a symbol of your death in a way. A baby and a mother. Almost like the shit in a strange way. Something that was once part of you, but is now separate from you. Instead, it's a reflection of, or a reminder of, your death, your inevitable death. There's a lot of examples in that, and I think if you rewatch the movie, we've given a little bit of an overview of it. I think watching it again and looking out for those themes, the definition of those themes in it, may be fun, maybe worth a rewatch.
Yeah.
Now, something that I think is definitely worth a rewatch is the various metaphors that they play with and the allegorical representations and characters.
Absolutely.
This is what gets me excited about this movie. They do this so well. And so the first most obvious one is the Pandora's box metaphor. And Melanie is a representation of Pandora, and her curiosity is something that drives her.
Give me a refresher real quick on Pandora's box.
Okay, yeah.
Because I'm always fuzzy on the details on this one.
Okay, all right. So that's pretty easy. Moving past how Pandora was created and all of that, Pandora basically has this box, and the purpose of the box is, it holds all the bad things.
Right.
Bad things. And if the box is opened, it will destroy humanity.
Because it's letting all the bad things out, is the idea, right?
And Pandora was created by the Greek gods, Zeus, actually. Mm-hmm. And her purpose was to eventually open that box. And the drive of that was curiosity. So she was doomed to open the box because she was so curious. Curiosity killed the cat, which ties back into the Schrodinger's box thing.
Right.
So eventually she opens the box because she's curious. She lets out all the bad things. Even though she was told not to open the box, she does. And oh shit, I opened the box, and lo and behold, it's going to destroy humanity. She quickly goes back to the box, and at the very bottom is hope. And that hope is what is supposed to save humanity. There were all of these bad things, and those bad things were going to destroy us. But that glimmer of hope is what allows us to continue on, what allows us to survive.
Survive in this realm that now has all these bad things.
All these bad things, all this chaos. And so cool. to tie that together, so we have Melanie. She's Pandora.
Right. And she's a very curious character throughout this film, too.
She's
always asking the adults, like, what's that for? How does it work? Thank you for telling me.
Uh-huh.
She's such an observer, yeah.
And she learns from all of that.
Right.
Not just curious, but curious in a way that she can survive in the world because of that curiosity.
Right.
And we'll get back to this later, but this is a clear inversion of all of these stories. So we have the metaphors that line up very, very well. Melanie is Pandora, but there's this inversion of the story, which gets really interesting. So we'll come back to that in a sec.
All right.
But okay, so Melanie opens the box, and that box is what? The fruit. Basically lighting that giant...
The spore tree.
The spore tree, right.
That's the box that she opens.
And something that's kind of interesting, the Pandora story is linked a lot to the story of Adam and Eve, where
that's interesting.
Eve partakes of that fruit, from the tree of knowledge, and because she's curious, and that basically
that's original sin.
Yeah, original sin, and the same kind of thing. It gives all the bad things. And so there's that clear connection,
after they did that, God cast them out of the Garden of Eden. He cast them out of paradise to go live in the real world.
Right. And so Melanie, in opening the box and opening the fruit, partaking of the fruit, releases all these bad things. Now, quickly we'll talk about the Schrodinger's cat story as well. So... Right. What's that story? The story is about, or it's more of a puzzle, I suppose, in some ways, in this shown in this movie. There's a cat in a box, and you don't know if it's alive or dead. And because of not knowing that, it's both, is the idea.
Right. It's based on some weird quantum mechanical equations that only loosely can can be metaphor, and that is Schrodinger's cat.
I love Melanie's response to that,
Yeah.
like, that's stupid.
Yeah. Well, her original solution to Schrodinger's box is the cat's not there because cats are clever and it would have figured a way to get out.
Right.
Which, like, she figured a way to get out, didn't she?
Right. Because, and I mean, even the doctor, Glenn Close's character, I mean, she says she's all about, you're going to open the box and you find yourself in there, that clear connection of she's clever enough that she can get herself out, but getting herself out unleashes all of these other things as well. Now, the way that this connects is we look at the very end of the movie where the Schrodinger's cat in the box itself is, if we talk about boxes, talk about Pandora's box, what's in the box at the very end of that story? Well, hope. And who resembles hope the most in this movie? Well, Miss Justineau.
And she ends up in a box.
She ends up in a box. But it's a box we can see inside. And yet she's a beacon of hope, right? At the end of the movie, we see that humanity is destroyed in that moment. It's the end of the world. It's the apocalypse. Glenn Close's character literally said it's the end of the world.
If that tree goes up, it's the end of the world, and it goes up.
It goes up. And
Miss Justineau's the last thing left of humanity now.
Right.
She's carrying on that hope of our culture and our knowledge and passing it on to these kids and giving them a piece of us, even though there's something new.
Right. There's something in the end, even though we're faced with the end of the world, we don't feel necessarily bad about it. There's this underlying feeling of goodness.
It feels like a new beginning.
Right, exactly. And
because we're asking this question of Melanie, or at least the human characters in this movie are asking this question of Melanie the whole time. Is she alive or dead?
Right.
Is this just mimicry caused by some fungal infection, or is she a real girl? Is she alive or dead?
Well, and they agree in the end that she is.
Yeah.
And, going back to survival real quick, Glenn Close's character is, speechless when Melanie asks her, why should I survive? Or why should I have to die for you to survive? And she had admitted right before that Melanie was a person. Melanie was alive. She was a real girl.
Yeah.
Now, if she's a real girl, if the children are people, then why should they have to die to save the human race?
The human race looks pretty done from what we can see in this movie,
For sure.
This is straight apocalypse outside of the military base.
Right.
What is the doctor trying to save exactly?
That is a very good point. I mean, even if she was able to extract this cure, this vaccine, what exactly would it do? It would just protect the people who were left alive, not infected. And there's really nothing left. Anyways.
Well, I think there's something interesting about the human characters, the sergeant, Miss Justineau, and the doctor. They all have a certain place that they keep their hope.
You picked that out.
Yeah, the doctor, her hope is in curing this disease. That's her entire purpose. That's what keeps her going.
Uh-huh.
No matter how much sense it makes, it's what keeps her going.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone's dead. Why are you still trying to do that? The sergeant, his very last words were, I just hoped that, when he's talking about his wife, he just hoped that his wife was still alive. But when he saw that tree going up, his hope died.
Well, and he knew secretly that she wasn't alive. I mean,
but it's what kept him going.
Big as a house, right? When he last saw her, and more than likely she got infected, and there's a little child running around attacking people.
Yeah, that's something super interesting that you picked up, is like how he's basically, he has a child that's like Melanie.
Yeah.
He probably out there. I'm sure in himself he hopes that, the child was born before and that she was still alive and they were safe somewhere, and he's just got to keep going. Miss Justineau, I think is really interesting, though, is because she puts her hope in Melanie's humanity. She's always fighting for
from
that.
the beginning.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And these children's humanity.
And that's clearly what she's going to do from here on out. You know, she's going to give that hope, give that humanity to these children as best she can.
Yeah.
And that's her purpose. And she's okay with that.
She is the hope in the box.
So here's where we start to get into the inversions. Okay.
Yeah.
So, first of all, the Pandora and Adam and Eve or the Eve eating the fruit, Pandora opening the box, that's motivated by curiosity. Curiosity killed the cat, which is what we talked about before. Now, in Melanie's case, curiosity is not a bad thing for her. Curiosity is what fuels her survival. She's curious, she learns all of these things, and then when she does things, when she performs actions or choices, she does it because she does it from a place of knowledge and from logic.
Because she's observed and seen how they work.
Right. So instead of curiosity being the downfall of the person doing it, or of, humanity of Melanie and the kids,
like in Pandora's box and Adam and Eve, like curiosity is what causes our suffering.
Right. Instead, curiosity is what fuels Melanie and ensures her survival. What lifts her up and makes her a person, really.
Yeah.
Her curiosity is everything. And
she was able to watch those kids and know how to interact with them so that she could alpha that situation, beat the biggest kid up, and so you can get through.
Right.
She observes.
Yeah.
So she observes in a way that allows her to act.
So that's the very first inversion for sure. Pandora, Eve.
Curiosity is a good thing.
Yeah. Yeah. The next would be if we're looking at the Schrodinger's cat story. We look at Miss Justineau, who's stuck in a box, right?
Right.
And yet the box is made of glass. We can see inside it. We can see Miss Justineau. We know that she's alive, but not really. She's also dead. And
she's trapped in this in-between place.
Right.
She can't actually live.
The very last scene, we see her. We're sleeping beside her, the way the camera's tilted, and she's, one lone tear falls from her face. I mean, her life, she doesn't really have a life anymore. All she has is passing on her hope, right? And yet, she lives, and yet she's dead. But we can see her, and that's what's so great. Not only,
that's what alive and dead looks like.
Yeah, right.
They're showing.
Exactly. Yeah. And then there's one more which ties back into the biblical references with the Adam and Eve. And I'm not sure if this was intentional, but I found it kind of interesting. So when I was rewatching it again, and I had, Adam and Eve running through my head, when that giant tree goes off, she burns that tower. And you see it going up in flame. My immediate thought was, oh, that's a pillar of fire.
It's a very biblical thing, a pillar of fire.
Yeah, and I'm like, that's got to be biblical, right? So I look it up, and pillar of fire is referenced in the story of Moses, and him getting his people out. And the pillar of fire was a message from God, which basically said, hey, it's time to get out of here. That was his signal. And that was, a saving story. Moses taking his people and surviving. In this case, that pillar represents the destruction of humanity. That's one more inversion. I mean, but the pillar of fire is something that's going to save Melanie and her kind, and of course all the zombies, they're going to be okay. But really, it's a symbol of the destruction of the human race, and once again, a symbol of something new, Although from what I remember, Moses and his people didn't have a great time after they got out of Egypt.
They wandered for 40 years.
That sounds terrible.
Yeah.
Thanks for listening to this week's episode of Couch Theater. My guest and our creative consultant is Greg Dernbach. Artwork by Robot, who you can follow on Instagram at 20th Century Robot. All episodes are written and produced by me, Stefan Cowper, along with a few questionable bass lines. You can listen to us wherever you get your podcasts. You can listen to us on YouTube, or you can follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter, all under Couch Theater. We hope that you enjoyed this week's episode and that you come back next week for another movie and another conversation.